Where rivers meet, civilizations rise, and heroes are born. In a humble cradle lay the child who would defy an empire. Strength was not given to him, he earned it in the fire of training. Before he faced the world, he won the hearts of his own people. Not just a crown on his head, but the weight of a nation on his shoulders. In the heart of South Asia, between the rivers Jhelum and Chenab, lies a land that has witnessed countless battles, cultures, and civilizations. This fertile land, which we now call Punjab, was once the stage of one of the most legendary encounters in history. Here, in 326 BCE, a great warrior king rose to defend his people and his honor against the might of Alexander the Great. His name was Raja Porus, remembered in Greek texts as Porus. In the heart of South Asia, between the rivers Jhelum and Chenab, lies a land that has witnessed countless battles, cultures, and civilizations. This fertile land, which we now call Punjab, was once the stage of one of the most legendary encounters in history. Here, in 326 BCE, a great warrior king rose to defend his people and his honor against the might of Alexander the Great. His name was Raja Porus, remembered in Greek texts as Porus. In 326 BCE, the Macedonian conqueror Alexander marched into Punjab after defeating kingdoms in Persia, Bactria, and Afghanistan. His army was vast and disciplined, but it was also exhausted from years of campaigning. When they reached the banks of the Jhelum River near present-day Jhelum district, they found an opponent unlike any they had faced before. Raja Porus was waiting, prepared with tens of thousands of infantry, thousands of cavalry, and over 100 war elephants, an awe-inspiring force that the Greeks had never encountered in battle. The land of Porus stretched between the mighty rivers Jhelum and Chenab. This fertile plain was blessed with rich soil, flowing waters, and thriving agriculture. The people here lived in prosperity, cultivating wheat, barley, and rice. It was also a land where elephants roamed freely, becoming symbols of royal power. This region was not just a kingdom, it was a cradle of culture, resilience, and unity under the rule of Porus. Porus was born into a proud lineage of the Puru tribe, a clan known for courage and leadership. From an early age, he was trained in the art of warfare. Riding swift horses, commanding elephants, and mastering archery and swordsmanship, Porus grew into a warrior prince. His childhood was shaped not by comfort but by discipline, preparing him for the challenges that lay ahead. As Porus grew, his leadership qualities shone brightly. After the passing of his predecessor, he ascended the throne of his ancestors. The coronation was marked by grandeur and loyalty, with nobles, priests, and warriors pledging allegiance to their new king. Porus was not just a ruler by birth, but a leader by merit, admired for his wisdom, strength, and sense of justice. The kingdom of Porus was not a small principality. It commanded vast resources and a disciplined army. Elephants stood as living fortresses, cavalry charged with speed, and infantry held the line with determination. Under Porus, this army became a symbol of unity and strength, prepared to defend their land against any invader. The people of Porus's kingdom lived simple yet prosperous lives. Farmers toiled in fertile fields, artisans crafted pottery and ornaments, and traders carried goods along river routes. It was a society where courage and honor were valued, and loyalty to the king was seen as loyalty to the land itself. The borders of Porus's realm were often tested by raiders and rival tribes. But time and again, Porus defended his people with bravery and strategy. Each victory added to his reputation, not only as a ruler but as a protector. For his people, he was more than a king, he was their shield against danger. The borders of Porus's realm were often tested by raiders and rival tribes. But time and again, Porus defended his people with bravery and strategy. Each victory added to his reputation, not only as a ruler but as a protector. For his people, he was more than a king, he was their shield against danger. Alexander the Great, after subduing Bactria and Sogdia, set his eyes upon India. In 326 BCE, he crossed the mighty Hindu Kush and marched into the fertile lands of Punjab. This was not just another campaign. For Alexander, it was the edge of the known world, a place of mystery and immense challenge. As his army trudged through mountains and rivers, the soldiers grew wary. Yet, Alexander pressed on with ambition burning within him, determined to extend his empire beyond anything Greece had ever imagined. The Punjab Alexander entered was no ordinary land. It was the meeting place of 5 great rivers, a region famed for its fertility, prosperity, and ancient traditions. Its people were warriors, traders, and farmers. Unlike the deserts and steppes Alexander had crossed, here he found a land that could sustain armies and challenge conquerors. To control Punjab meant controlling a land of abundance, and this was exactly what Alexander sought to achieve. Before facing Porus, Alexander found an ally in Amhi, the king of Taxila. Unlike Porus, Amhi chose diplomacy over war. He welcomed Alexander with open arms, offering him riches, elephants, and safe passage. To Amhi, aligning with Alexander was a strategy of survival and opportunity. But for Porus, this foreign invader was a direct threat to his land and people. Thus, while Taxila submitted, the seeds of conflict between Porus and Alexander were already sown. Porus, the king of the Paurava kingdom, was no ordinary ruler. His reputation as a just and powerful king stretched across the land. Tall, strong, and commanding, he was respected by his people and feared by his enemies. Unlike many local rulers who bent before Alexander, Porus stood firm. His land lay between the rivers Jhelum and Chenab, and he was determined to defend it at any cost. To Alexander, Porus was more than a rival. He was a symbol of Indian resistance. As news of Alexander's approach spread, Porus began his preparations. He gathered his warriors, trained them rigorously, and strengthened his mighty war elephants. For Porus, this was not just about defending territory. It was about honor, about standing against a foreign invader who sought to dominate his land. Every sword sharpened, every elephant armored, every soldier trained reflected Porus's determination. He was not willing to submit, and he would fight with all the power he could muster. Alexander was no stranger to great enemies, but Porus was unlike any foe he had faced before. The king of Paurava commanded elephants, beasts that terrified horses and soldiers alike. To defeat Porus, Alexander needed more than courage, he needed strategy. He studied the terrain, the rivers, and the behavior of Porus's army. He realized that crossing the swollen Jhelum would be the key to surprising his enemy. And so, a game of wits began between 2 remarkable leaders. The campaign against Porus was delayed by the monsoon. Torrential rains flooded rivers and turned the land into mud. Soldiers struggled to march, horses slipped, and supplies were hard to move. But Alexander saw opportunity in adversity. While nature slowed his men, it also masked his movements. The swollen river became both a challenge and a weapon in his hands, for he planned to use the chaos of the monsoon to outwit Porus. Porus chose his ground carefully. He stationed his army on the banks of the Jhelum, ready to block Alexander's crossing. His elephants stood like towers of strength, his infantry firm and disciplined. Porus believed that the river itself would defend his land, for he expected Alexander to attempt a direct crossing. But Porus underestimated the cunning of his enemy. Alexander was planning a deception that would turn the river into a trap, not an obstacle. Alexander knew that a frontal assault would be disastrous. Instead, he staged deception. Each night, he would move his troops along the riverbank, making it seem as though he planned a crossing at multiple points. Porus, watching closely, was kept guessing. Then, under the cover of a stormy night, Alexander began his real move. He quietly marched part of his army upstream, ready to cross where Porus least expected it. At last, Alexander made his daring move. Through the raging waters of the Jhelum, his men crossed on rafts, boats, and even by swimming with their horses. Thunder roared, lightning flashed, and the river seemed determined to swallow them whole. Yet, Alexander's leadership kept them moving. On the far bank, his soldiers regrouped, drenched but resolute. The crossing was complete, and now the stage was set for one of the most legendary battles in history. As Alexander's campaign advanced, his forces finally reached the mighty Indus, a river that served as the gateway to Porus's kingdom. With discipline and remarkable engineering skill, the Macedonian army built boats, ferries, and rafts to cross the waters. Dawn light reflected on their bronze armor as horses, elephants, and soldiers moved in steady rhythm. The crossing of the Indus was not merely a logistical act, it was the first signal to Porus that a monumental clash was inevitable. News of Alexander's crossing spread quickly. In his court, Porus listened attentively as his messengers described the Macedonian king's relentless march. Calm yet resolute, Porus gathered his generals. Maps were unrolled, strategies debated. He knew this was not a mere raid but an invasion led by one of the most formidable commanders in history. His task was to protect his kingdom's honor and stand as a shield for the land of Punjab. The river Jhelum, swollen by monsoon rains, stood between Alexander and Porus. Its turbulent waters made crossing impossible while Porus's elephants and cavalry guarded the opposite bank. For weeks, Alexander studied the flow, sending scouts up and down the river. He knew that a direct crossing would be suicide. The great strategist was preparing one of his most daring maneuvers. On a stormy night, under the cover of darkness and heavy rain, Alexander led a select force upstream. Using boats and rafts, they crossed at a hidden bend of the river. The thunder and rain masked the sound of oars and hooves. By dawn, a significant portion of the Macedonian army stood on the opposite bank, ready to surprise Porus. It was a masterstroke of timing and secrecy. When news reached Porus that Alexander had crossed, he wasted no time. Mounted on his majestic war elephant, Porus led an army unlike any the Macedonians had faced before. Towering elephants formed the backbone of his force, supported by swift cavalry and disciplined infantry. The clash ahead would not be just another conquest for Alexander, it would be a test of endurance, strategy, and courage. The plains near the river Hydaspes became the stage for one of antiquity's greatest battles. The ground was soft and muddy from monsoon rains, making cavalry movements difficult. Porus positioned his elephants like living fortresses across the front, while Alexander arranged his phalanx in tight formation. Both armies stared across the field, knowing the day would decide the fate of Punjab. The battle began with thunderous charges. Alexander's cavalry stormed the flanks, while Porus's elephants advanced, trampling men and horses underfoot. The air filled with dust, cries, and the clash of steel. Each elephant towered like a moving fortress, scattering Macedonian lines. Yet, Alexander's soldiers, trained to adapt, closed ranks again and again, refusing to yield. Realizing the danger of elephants, Alexander ordered his cavalry to circle and harass them from all sides. Archers targeted the mahouts, causing the beasts to panic. Some elephants, wounded and frightened, turned back, trampling Porus's own soldiers. The battlefield turned into a storm of confusion where strategy met raw power. In the midst of chaos, Porus stood tall on his war elephant, a symbol of defiance and courage. With spear in hand, he rallied his men, refusing to retreat. His presence inspired the army to fight on, even as the Macedonian pressure increased. Porus's bravery became the heart of the resistance, making him a legend in the eyes of both friend and foe. After hours of brutal combat, exhaustion spread across the battlefield. Many elephants collapsed, their strength spent. The Macedonian phalanx, disciplined and unrelenting, pushed forward. Porus's army, though brave, began to waver under the relentless pressure. The turning point had come, and the fate of the battle now hung by a thread. The tide of battle begins to shift. Alexander's cavalry maneuvers around the elephants, cutting down the infantry that supported them. The great beasts, wounded and disoriented, trample friend and foe alike. Yet Porus stands tall upon his war elephant, commanding his men with unwavering resolve. His courage becomes a symbol of resistance, even as defeat draws near. Porus fights on despite his wounds. Arrows pierce his flesh, yet he does not falter. Even his loyal elephant, weary and bleeding, lifts itself to continue the struggle. The battlefield, once filled with noise, now carries a strange silence as men marvel at the indomitable spirit of their king. Porus fights on despite his wounds. Arrows pierce his flesh, yet he does not falter. Even his loyal elephant, weary and bleeding, lifts itself to continue the struggle. The battlefield, once filled with noise, now carries a strange silence as men marvel at the indomitable spirit of their king. Porus finds himself surrounded. His guards fall one by one, yet he continues to resist. Macedonian soldiers hesitate, awed by his bravery. They move in carefully, not to destroy, but to capture. The king, wounded yet proud, prepares to meet his fate with the dignity of a true warrior. At last, Porus lowers his weapon. Exhaustion, wounds, and the weight of the battle force him to stop. The Macedonians do not cheer, nor do they mock. They recognize that they have captured not just a man, but a legend. Porus is taken to Alexander's camp with respect, as if a fellow monarch is being escorted. Alexander, though victorious, does not underestimate his opponent. He knows he is about to meet a ruler whose bravery has already become legend. The tent falls silent as Porus, wounded but unbowed, is brought before the conqueror of the known world. Alexander looks into the eyes of the defeated king and asks, "How do you wish to be treated?" Without hesitation, Porus replies, "As a king should be treated." These words echo through history, a testament to his dignity and pride even in defeat. Alexander is struck by the courage of Porus. In that moment, he sees not a defeated rival, but an equal. He acknowledges Porus not only with mercy but with admiration, declaring that such a man deserves to rule. Instead of stripping him of power, Alexander restores Porus to his throne. This act shocks many, but it also secures loyalty. Porus becomes not a captive, but a trusted ally. The conqueror and the king now share an unusual bond, forged in battle and sealed with respect. Porus' story does not end with defeat. It becomes a lesson for generations, that true kingship lies not in victory, but in courage and dignity. His name lives on, remembered as the king who faced Alexander with unyielding pride and left behind a legacy of honor. The Battle of Hydaspes ended, but its echoes lingered across the land. Though Alexander had achieved a hard-fought victory, the cost was immense. The battlefield was filled with the memories of courage and sacrifice. Yet, amid this destruction, a new understanding was born. Porus, though defeated, stood tall in dignity. His encounter with Alexander would mark not the end, but the beginning of an unexpected alliance. Brought as a prisoner before Alexander, Porus appeared neither broken nor humiliated. Instead, he stood tall, embodying the pride of his people. The Macedonian king, used to submissive rulers, found himself in awe. Porus's defiance in the face of defeat was unlike anything Alexander had encountered before. History remembers their brief but immortal dialogue. Alexander asked, "How do you wish to be treated?" Porus's reply was simple yet profound, like a king. This response left Alexander speechless. In that single phrase, Porus had defined his identity, not as a prisoner, but as a ruler who deserved respect. Alexander, impressed by Porus's courage, chose not to humiliate him. Instead, he restored his throne and even granted him more territories. This act was not weakness but wisdom. For Alexander understood that respect often earned greater loyalty than fear. Now restored to power, Porus became one of Alexander's most trusted allies in the region. His kingdom grew stronger under this unusual partnership. Together, the Macedonians and Indians forged a temporary peace, proving that even rivals could shape history side by side. The story of Alexander and Porus is not only about conquest and defeat. It is about respect born from bravery. Their relationship remains one of the rare examples where a conqueror and the conquered stood as equals. When Alexander died in Babylon, his empire was thrown into chaos. Yet in Punjab, Porus remained a stable ruler. His reign continued, reminding the world that local kings often outlast even the greatest conquerors. In the years that followed, Porus expanded his territories and strengthened his rule. Though once defeated, he never lost his honor. His legacy became a symbol of resilience and leadership. Porus eventually passed away, leaving behind a legacy carved in both Indian and Greek history. To his people, he was not just a king but a defender of their land and pride. His story lived on as a reminder of courage in the face of impossible odds. Today, the name of Porus still inspires. His bravery was celebrated even by his enemies. From ancient chronicles to modern retellings, Porus stands as a timeless symbol of honor, dignity, and the enduring spirit of resistance. The river Hydaspes, where he fought Alexander, continues to flow, carrying with it the memory of a king who refused to bow.